Rich Pompeians often lived in magnificent houses like these, with large numbers of rooms to support a luxurious lifestyle. Every detail of the design reflected their wealth and social position. And it was in beautiful houses such as this one, called the House of Menander, that would be home to a large number of people who both lived and worked within its walls.
We think of a family as a unit of related people, or of course a husband and wife married people. For the Romans, the word familia, which is the approximate Latin equivalent, doesn't mean just blood relations, but means an entire household. So slaves, your household slaves, would be part of your familia.
For the master, every personal comfort was taken care of. Washing and bathing took place in this luxurious private bathroom, with decorated walls and floors covered in mosaics of exotic creatures. But the slaves, the other part of the Menander family, had their own living quarters at the back of the house. These rooms contrasted starkly with their master's luxurious apartments. Their rooms were simple, bare, with little or no decoration, and with their own back entrance, which was tucked away in a side street, well away from the front of the house. Household slaves did a variety of jobs around the house, waiting and serving at table, for instance. There would be slaves who helped the mistress of the house to dress and arrange her hair and put on her makeup. This slave was responsible for looking after a young child, showing just how much some families trusted their slaves. Slaves were even entrusted to run the household. Stewards, who could also be freedmen, usually supervised all the other slaves' duties. And there were the educated slaves, men who could read and write. They might be clerks in the house, but some were also teachers and even doctors. But although many household slaves had relatively good jobs and even comfortable lives compared to, say, working the mines, the way they became enslaved might have been by very violent means. Frequently, they were bought and sold in their own countries beyond the Roman Empire. But there were a number of ways you could become a slave.
There were three ways in which, broadly speaking, one could become a slave. The first was simply by being born into a slave household. If your mother was a slave, you became a slave. The second way was by being captured. Very often in conquest, when Rome conquered her empire, she conquered other countries. The prisoners would be brought to Italy or elsewhere in the empire as slaves. The third way is that children, babies, were often exposed, put out to die by their parents, perhaps because the parents couldn't afford to bring them up. And in Rome this was perfectly legal because fathers had absolute power of life and death over their children, just as they had it over their slaves. Those children, those babies who were put out to die, might die, but very often they wouldn't die. They would be picked up by someone else, and they would, being undocumented, be made into slaves.
When we try and understand what the people of Pompeii were like and how they lived, we should never forget that in every household, at least one of them would have been a slave.